Hello and welcome to Top of the Ninth. Today we are looking at the top 9 players of the 90s ranked by total WAR throughout the decade. Please remember to like, share, and subscribe. 9 to kick us off is 1995 NL MVP Barry Larkin. Larkin played all 19 years of his career for his hometown Cincinnati Reds, helping them win the 1990 World Series over the A's. Their shortstop for over 2 decades, during the 90s won 7 Silver Sluggers as the best hitting shortstop of his time and 3 Gold Gloves. He had his best year in 1995, winning MVP with a 319 average, 15 home runs, while winning Gold Glove, leading the Reds to first place in the NL Central. In the 90s, Larkin averaged 5.2 wins above replacement a season in only 129 games a season. Back in the 90s, shortstops were hitting 30-plus home runs a season like they are today. Position prioritized defense, which Larkin excelled at while providing a big boost of offense over his peers, finished with a 52.6 WAR in the 90s. Number 8 on this list is Big Hurt Frank Thomas, the premier first baseman of the 90s. He was top 8 in MVP 7 straight years from 1991 to 97, with him winning the award back-to-back years in 93 and 94. During that stretch, he averaged a 330 average, 36 home runs, an on-base percentage of .452. While everyone else was pitching around Barry Bonds, they did the same to Thomas as he led the American League in walks 4 times during the decade and becoming 10th all-time in career walks. With 5 seasons above a 6 wins above replacement, he finished the decade in 8th place with a total WAR of 52.8 and could have been higher if he played at least average defense, as he put up a negative 14.8 WAR from his bad defense at first. 7th is the first group pitchers on this list in 1994 Cy Young winner David Cone, one of the best World Series pitchers ever. If your team liked to win, you wanted David Cone on your team. A 5-time champ, 4 with the Yankees and 1 with the Blue Jays in 92, had 5 seasons where he had over 200 strikeouts in the season during the decade and won over 14 games a year 6 times to become one of the most consistent players and the ace of the Yankees in the late 90s dynasty. In 1999, he cemented his place in baseball history as he threw the 16th perfect game in MLB history, topping the Expos with 10 strikeouts and doing so with only 88 pitches. In total, Cone won 141 games, struck out 1,928 players, and had a 3.21 ERA in the 90s. He put up a 52.9 win above replacement in the 90s. 6th place is former Astros great Greg Biggio, part of the 3,000 hit club. Biggio was as versatile of a player as anyone, playing over 300 games in the outfield, over 200 at catcher, and almost 2,000 games at second base, playing some great defense along the way, winning 4 Gold Gloves during the 90s. He led the National League in double 3 times and played over 160 games a year 5 different times, racked up a lot of WAR due to playing in almost every game while putting up some great offense and defensive numbers. Biggio put up 4 more WAR 9 out of 10 years during this decade, being super consistent with his best year being in 1997, putting up a massive 9.4 WAR, finished the 90 with 53.2 total. That is Biggio's teammate in 1994 MVP Jeff Bagwell. Playing in only 9 seasons during this decade, with 91 being his rookie year, is a testament to how great of a player he was. During the 90s, he hit 363 home runs with a 304 average and 416 on-base percentage to help Biggio and the Astros have some great seasons. An underrated defender with only 1 Gold Glove, was a true 5-tool player as he averaged 18 stolen bases a season, which is unheard of from a third baseman. Bagwell made the Hall of Fame in 2017 to join his teammate Biggio there, as they will go down as the 2 greatest Astros hitter ever, with him having the 5th best WAR of the 90s with 56.9. In the 90s, there were 4 elite players with over 65 WAR as they went on to become legends in the game, with a 65.4 WAR, and 4th is Greg Maddox, winner of 4 Cy Youngs in a row from 1992 to 96, an additional 3 top 5 finishes in the decade, he put up one of the best peaks a player have ever have. Known for his elite control and attacking hitters, he had a stat named after him where if a player throws a complete game in under 100 pitches and allow one or less run, he threw a Maddox, which Greg threw 13 times in his career. With him throwing to so much contact, they often hit the ball weakly to him, and that led him to win a record 18 Gold Gloves in total. Part of the Big Three pitching rotation for the Braves with Tom Glavine and John Smoltz, who each won a Cy Young in the 90s, they helped lead the Braves to 3 appearances in the World Series. 8th all-time in career wins with 355, part of the 3000 K Club. In the 90s, he absolutely dominated as he won the most games with 176 in the decade, pitching the most innings, and had 23 shutouts, and the best starter ERA with a 2.54 ERA over a 10-year period that saw him put up 65.4 WAR, all in the 90s. He started off the top three as one of the most fun players in the kid and Griffey Jr. This dude was absolutely electric, being the most popular player in baseball, making all 10 All-Star games during the decade while winning the Gold Glove in center field all 10 years also. Jr. seemed to always play with a smile, making athletic plays, wowing the crowd in Seattle, helping them become relevant for the first time in their franchise history. He hit the second most home runs in the decade behind only Mark McGwire, who broke the single-season home run record in '98 with a little help of steroids. Almost the first unanimous Hall of Famer ever, Griffey hit 382 home runs in the 90s with a .302 average, the 10 Gold Gloves, 7 Silver Sluggers, and 2 MVPs to become a great all-around player and put up 67.5 WAR in the decade. Runner-up for the best player of the 90s is the best pitcher in Roger Clemens, who in his whole career won a record 7 Cy Youngs, with 3 coming in the 90s. Third all-time in strikeouts with 4,672 and have 354 career wins. Clemens was as good of a pitcher in history as anyone, but is not part of the Hall of Fame due to his alleged steroid use, even though he never tested positive for it or admitted to it. In the 90s alone, he struck out 2,101 hitters to a .302 ERA mark, with some of the most overpowering stuff in the game. In 1997, he had one of the greatest seasons in MLB history. He won 21 games for the Blue Jays, while pitching to a tune of a 2.05 ERA with 291 strikeouts and 11.9 WAR, which is the 7th most WAR in a season by a pitcher after 1900. With 68.1 WAR in the 90s, he came in second place for the best player of the 90s. In first place, with a wide margin of 12.1 WAR more than second place Clemens, is the greatest hitter ever, Barry Bonds. He put up 80.2 WAR in the 90s before there was even any steroid accusation around him. In the 90s, he won his first 3 of 7 MVPs, became the best 5-tool player in the game since his godfather, Willie Mays. I think this was not his most dominant decade is absurd to think, but in the 90s, he still slugged 361 homers, a .302 average, 343 stolen bases, 3 MVPs, 7 Gold Gloves, and led baseball with 1,146 walks in the decade. Even before the steroids, people were afraid of him as he had 257 intentional walks in the 90s, 95 more than second place Griffey, including the most famous intentional walk in history, one in 1999. The Diamondbacks walked Barry Bonds with bases loaded. No one will go down in baseball as a more dominant player than Bonds, and in the 90s, no one was as more valuable than Bonds, even without the steroids.